everybody, welcome to another lesson of learning Japanese. Today we are continuing off where we left off in probably the previous video, and that is our introduction to kanji. In this video, we're going to cover the advantages and disadvantages of kanji, the Japanese writing system that originates from China and uses Chinese characters. So we're going to cover the advantages of kanji first, so here we go into the first one. So what I'll categorize the first one as is basically clarity. So if we're talking about the Japanese language with just hiragana and katakana, no kanji at all, it shares a weakness with the English language, and that is clarity, in which we don't know what a word means until we have context from the rest of the sentence or other words it's being used with, if that word has multiple meanings. And a lot of words in English and a lot of words in Japanese have multiple meanings. For example, in English, if we have the word break, that could be a verb to break something, or it could be a noun, taking a break. Another one is the word run, which is probably one of the words with the most definitions in the English language. You could run a business, you could run as in jogging but at a faster level. You could use it as a noun as in you had a nice run, etc. So in Japanese, with kanji implemented, there is a solution to this basically, because since there are so many kanji and each one represents a certain idea, when you see the word and it's written in kanji, and provided you know that kanji, you immediately know the idea that it represents because of the kanji characters, so you know immediately what it means. And this is, of course, despite the fact that it has a pronunciation that is shared with so many other words, because kanji is an ideographic system as opposed to a phonetic one. So for example, we'll use the actual word kanji itself, and this word has probably more than 5 different meanings in the Japanese language, but you'll know exactly which one is being used the moment you see the word being used, because the kanji will give it away. For example, if we see this kanji, which has the pronunciation kanji, we'll know that it stands for kanji, the characters of the Han Dynasty, the Chinese characters. Alternatively, if we see this kanji, which also has the pronunciation kanji, we know that this character stands for feeling, basically. So we'll know that that kanji means feeling, not the Chinese characters of the Han Dynasty, even though those two words are pronounced exactly the same. Our next advantage of kanji is what I'm going to term as basically compression and processing. So in the previous video, the first introduction to kanji, I compared kanji to the number system in English a lot, and we're going to do that again because it's very helpful. It's a very helpful analogy. So in this case, we're going to deal with how to process something that you see quicker than you would if you weren't using kanji. And the same thing applies to numbers basically, because if you see 6 instances of the number 9, just 9999999, you'll know what that means immediately. You'll know that it means 999,999. However, if you saw that written out with English characters with Roman letters, then that would take a much longer time to process, because all of it written out would basically be the length of an entire sentence, and you'll have to read every single instance of 9 in those Roman letters, along with the suffixes that represent their digit value, the T at the end of 90, the 100 after 900, the 1000 after 9000. That takes way longer, and so we see that 999999 is much easier to process, and that's going to be the exact same thing that applies to kanji. When written out in kanji characters, words are going to be able to be processed much faster than they will be if they were written in hiragana, unless the hiragana version is also going to consist of basically 1 or 2 characters. That's going to be the same way with the kanji. Then I guess it'd be the same processing time. But there would also be the case of not knowing the meaning of the word right away. For example, if we have the hiragana character ha, that could be interpreted as ha as in tooth, or wa as in the particle that denotes the topic of a sentence. But if we wrote the character for tooth in kanji, then we would know immediately that it's tooth and not the particle to denote the topic of a sentence. And so that's how we are taking the hiragana version of words and compressing them into their kanji counterparts to make the overall text appear shorter, as well as using kanji to process the meaning of words quickly. A little tidbit to that advantage is the arguable issue of the Japanese language not employing spaces between its words. Kanji eases that burden a considerable amount because, structurally speaking, kanji is going to represent ideas, and hiragana, conversely, is going to be used for the most part for grammatical nuances in a sentence. So with that grammatical structure in mind, we can kind of interpret it as whenever the thing that we're reading switches from kanji to hiragana, and vice versa. That's probably going to mean a word has ended. So that dynamic right there kind of acts in lieu of the space that is used in the English language. To give an idea of how useful the compression of kanji is, just imagine a relatively long English English words such as internalization, and imagine if that could be represented with just one character. So internalization turns into the length of just the letter I, basically, and that's how useful kanji is being in terms of compressing things into a smaller amount. And now we move on to the last advantage of kanji, well, last as far as I've perceived myself, and although this is probably the most inconsequential advantage, it is pretty cool to think about, and this is basically the advantage of transcendence. So because kanji is a system in which the characters represent ideas and it's not so important to focus on the pronunciation, the phonetics, kanji characters can go on representing ideas forever and just keep picking up new pronunciations like they actually have throughout history to tailor to other variables of language slash communication, basically. And so theoretically what this means is that kanji could basically be used in every single language in the world and just keep evolving from there on. And that in fact is basically what the number system that is used in English is already. It's used in multiple languages, definitely not every single language in the world, but it's expanded to multiple languages and it's used in all of them, and everybody knows what the numbers mean and the pronunciations are different, but everybody knows what they mean. However, it is also pretty wishful thinking to want that for the kanji writing system as well. So the odds that it'll spread to another language in the world is pretty unlikely, with the exception of the language that it derived from, which is Chinese. So the fact that kanji characters in Japanese have so many pronunciations is very much influenced by the history of importing Chinese characters into the Japanese language repeatedly throughout history. And ultimately what this means on a very fractured level is that if you learn kanji, Japanese kanji, you'll actually be able to make out the meaning of some Chinese, even though you will not be able to pronounce them unless you know Chinese. But just the thought of that is really cool, that you'll be able to interpret something that you have no idea how to even utter. So that's a cool thing about kanji, cool enough to be considered an advantage in my opinion. And yeah, so those are the three main advantages of kanji that I can perceive at this point: clarity, compression slash processing, and transcendence. And it's probably the second one, compression and processing, that justifies the existence of kanji first and foremost, and the main reason for its existence, basically. Being able to compress words that much and process things that quickly is actually a very, very important thing. And so moving on to the disadvantage of kanji, this is basically going to answer at what cost we are being able to compress words that much and process words that quickly. And the disadvantage of kanji, the main disadvantage of kanji, is volume. And so what volume means is that there are just so many friggin' kanji. So let's go back to the short definition of kanji real quick. This is a writing system in which each character is going to represent a particular idea. And what we kind of need to realize here is that is a very ambitious writing system, and basically too ambitious to ever be complete. It is completely unrealistic to create a writing system in which every single idea in the universe is represented by a character. Why? Because there are an infinite amount of ideas in the universe, and it just keeps increasing with every single day. Think of the things that are being invented every day, every year, and to have a character represent every single idea, that means every single person would have to memorize an infinite amount of characters by heart just to be able to communicate with each other. And people just aren't down to do that. So what kanji does to kind of solve this is to make each character represent kind of a set of ideas as opposed to a specific one. So how does that help? Well, it basically shortens an infinite amount of kanji characters to, say, about 50,000 since the dawn of time. And that's still way too much, so what we in the present day do, the Japanese government has issued basically a set of 2,000 kanji characters that should be memorized. It's established as compulsory education, basically. And if you're able to master this set of 2,000 kanji characters, which is still a very hard feat, which I myself definitely have not mastered yet, you'll pretty much be able to function and be a literate person in terms of Japanese media of the present day, such as newspaper articles, TV broadcasts, stuff like that. You'll be able to read with no problem if you know the 2,000, not just any 2,000 kanji characters, but the 2,000 most commonly used kanji characters. You could know 48,000 kanji characters, but they could be the most archaic and obscure ones, and it wouldn't help you at all in the present day. So the 2000 established characters. So the 2000 established kanji characters is the goal for the everyday Japanese speaker. And again, that is still very, very hard. If you learned a new kanji every day, it would still take about 6 years just to learn 2000, and that's the standard basically. And so yeah, that should reiterate the main disadvantage of the kanji system, and that is just volume. Having to remember so many characters until you can actually use the advantages of the kanji system, in which those advantages are having clarity of a word, being able to compress words, not just words, but basically whole sentences into very, very short forms, and being able to process what words mean very quickly, and having a kind of transcendent level of knowledge, which you can kind of know what some Chinese characters slash words mean, but not on a dependable level. But yeah, so that is kanji, arguably the hardest part of the Japanese language to master, but nonetheless it is something that is recommended to be started upon at the beginning of your pursuit of learning the Japanese language. Basically, you should know hiragana and katakana first, and then you should delve into kanji at a slower pace than hiragana and katakana, but nonetheless at a steady one, to be able to know how to read Japanese as well as speak it. So that's kanji, the advantages and disadvantages, at least the ones that I can mostly perceive at this point. And so yeah, this video lesson has pretty much been just a contextual explanation. No hard examples or first-hand experience to kanji that much, but context is very important, and as we go along in this introduction to kanji, we have some more topics to discuss. We'll find out that historical context will actually help us read kanji that we've never seen before, but consists of kanji that we've seen before better. So yeah, stay tuned for a more extensive introduction to kanji, the ever frustrating writing system of the Japanese language.